A Passage to India, Chapter 9. Aziz fell ill as he foretold, slightly ill. 3 days later, he lay abed in his bungalow, pretending to be very ill. It was a touch of fever, which he would have neglected if there was anything important at the hospital. Now and then he groaned and thought he should die, but did not think so for long, and a very little diverted him. It was Sunday, always an equivocal day in the East, and an excuse for slacking. He could hear church bells as he drowsed, both from the civil station and from the missionaries out beyond the slaughterhouse. Different bells, and rung with different intent, for one set was calling firmly to Anglo-India, and the other feebly to mankind. He did not object to the first set. The other he ignored, knowing their inefficiency. Old Mr. Graceford and young Mr. Sorley made converts during a famine, because they distributed food. But when times improved, they were naturally left alone again, and though surprised and aggrieved each time this happened, they never learnt wisdom. No Englishman understands us except Mr. Fielding, he thought. But how shall I see him again? If he entered this room, the disgrace of it would kill me. He called to Hassan to clear up. But Hassan, who was testing his wages by ringing them on the step of the veranda, found it possible not to hear him. Heard and didn't hear, just as Aziz had called and hadn't called. That's India all over. How like us. There we are. He dozed off again, and his thoughts wandered over the varied surface of life. Gradually, they steadied upon a certain spot, the bottomless pit according to missionaries, but he had never regarded it as more than a dimple. Yes, he did want to spend an evening with some girls, singing and all that, the vague jollity that would culminate in voluptuousness. Yes, that was what he did want. How could it be managed? If Major Callender had been an Indian, he would have remembered that young men are, and granted 2 or 3 days' leave to Calcutta without asking questions. But the Major assumed either that his subordinates were made of ice, or that they repaired to the Chandapur bazaars. Disgusting ideas, both. It was only Mr. Fielding who— "Hassan!" The servant came running. "Look at those flies, brother," and he pointed to a horrible mass that hung from the ceiling. The nucleus was a wire which had been inserted as an homage to electricity. Electricity had paid no attention, and a colony of eye-flies had come instead and blackened the coils with their bodies. "Huzur, those are flies." "Good, good, they are. Excellent. But why have I called you?" "To drive them elsewhere," said Hassan, after painful thought. "Driven elsewhere, they always return." "Huzur, you must make some arrangement against flies. That is why you are my servant," said Aziz gently. Hassan would call the little boy to borrow the step-ladder from Muhammad Ali's house. He would order the cook to light the Primus stove and heat water. He would personally ascend the steps with a bucket in his arms and dip the end of the coil into it. "Good, very good. Now what have you to do?" "Kill flies." "Good, do it." Hassan withdrew, the plan almost lodged in his head, and began to look for the little boy. Not finding him, his steps grew slower, and he stole back to his post on the veranda. But he did not go on testing his rupees, in case his master heard them clink. On twittered the Sunday bells. The East had returned to the East via the suburbs of England, and had become ridiculous during the detour. Aziz continued to think about beautiful women. His mind here was hard and direct, though not brutal. He had learned all he needed concerning his own constitution many years ago, thanks to the social order into which he had been born, and when he came to study medicine, He was repelled by the pedantry and fuss with which Europeans tabulates the facts of sex. Science seemed to discuss everything from the wrong end. It didn't interrupt his experiences when he found them in a German manual, because by being there, they ceased to be his experiences. What he had been told by his father or mother, or had picked up from servants, it was information of that sort that he found useful, and handed on as occasion offered to others. But he must not bring disgrace on his children by some silly escapade. Imagine if it got about that he was not respectable. His professional position, too, must be considered, whatever Major Calendar thought. Aziz upheld the proprieties, though he did not invest them with any moral halo, and it was here that he chiefly differed from an Englishman. His conventions were social. There is no harm in deceiving society as long as she does not find you out, because it is only when she finds you out that you have harmed her. She is not like a friend or God, who are injured by the mere existence of unfaithfulness. Quite clear about this, he meditated what type of lie he should tell to get away to Calcutta, and had thought of a man there who could be trusted to send him a wire and a letter that he could show to Major Calendar, when the noise of wheels was heard in his compound. Someone had called to inquire. The thought of sympathy increased his fever, and with a sincere groan he wrapped himself in his quilt. "Aziz, my dear fellow, we are greatly concerned," said Hamadullah's voice. 1, 2, 3, 4 bumps, as people sat down upon his bed. "When a doctor falls ill, it is a serious matter," said the voice of Mr. Saeed Mohammed, the assistant engineer. "When an engineer falls ill, it is equally important," said the voice of Mr. Haq, a police inspector. "Oh yes, we are all jolly important. Our salaries prove it." "Dr. Aziz took tea with our principal last Thursday afternoon," piped Rafi, the engineer's nephew. "Professor Godbole, who also attended, has sickened too, which seems a rather curious thing, sir, does it not?" Flames of suspicion leapt up in the breast of each man. "Humbug!" exclaimed Hamdullah in authoritative tones, quenching them. "Humbug, most certainly," echoed the others, ashamed of themselves. The wicked schoolboy, having failed to start a scandal, lost confidence, and stood up with his back to the wall. "Is Professor Godbole ill?" inquired Aziz, penetrated by the news. "I am sincerely sorry." Intelligent and compassionate, his face peeped out of the bright crimson folds of the quilt. "How do you do, Mr. Saeed Mohammed? Mr. Haq? How very kind of you to inquire after my health. How do you do, Hamadullah? But you bring me bad news. What is wrong with him, the excellent fellow?" "Why don't you answer, Rafi? You're the great authority," said his uncle. "Yes, Rafi's the great man," said Hamadullah, rubbing it in. "Rafi is the Sherlock Holmes of Shandapur. Speak up, Rafi." Less than the dust, the schoolboy murmured the word diarrhea, but took courage as soon as it had been uttered, for it improved his position. Flames of suspicion shot up again in the breasts of his elders, though in a different direction. Could what was called diarrhea really be an early case of cholera? If this is so, this is a very serious thing. This is scarcely the end of March. "Why have I not been informed?" cried Aziz. "Dr. Panalal attends him, sir." "Oh, yes, both Hindus. There we have it. They hang together like flies and keep everything dark. Rafi, come here. Sit down. Tell me all the details. Is there any vomiting also?" "Oh, yes, indeed, sir, and the serious pains." "That settles it. In 24 hours he will be dead." Everyone looked and felt shocked, but Professor Godbole had diminished his appeal by linking himself with a co-religionist. He moved them less than when he had appeared as a suffering individual. Before long, they began to condemn him as a source of infection. All illness proceeds from Hindus, Mr. Hack said. Mr. Saeed Mohammed had visited religious fairs at Allahabad and at Ujjain and described them with biting scorn. At Allahabad there was flowing water, which carried impurities away, but at Ujjain the little river Sipra was banked up, and thousands of bathers deposited their germs in the pool. He spoke with disgust of the hot sun, the cow dung and marigold flowers, and the encampment of sadhus, some of whom strode stark naked through the streets. Asked what was the name of the chief idol at Ujjain, he replied that he did not know. He had disdained to inquire. He really could not waste his time over such trivialities. His outburst took some time, and in his excitement he fell into Punjabi. He came from that side, and was unintelligible. Aziz liked to hear religion praised. It soothed the surface of his mind, and allowed beautiful images to form beneath. When the engineer's noisy tirade was finished, he said, "That is exactly my own view." He held up his hand, palm outward. His eyes began to glow, his heart to fill with tenderness. Issuing still farther from his quilt, he recited a poem of Ghalib. It had no connection with anything that had gone before, but it came from his heart and spoke to theirs. They were overwhelmed by its pathos. Pathos, they agreed, is the highest quality in art. A poem should touch the hearer with a sense of his own weakness, and should institute some comparison between mankind and flowers. The squalid bedroom grew quiet. The silly intrigues, the gossip, the shallow discontent were stilled, while words accepted as immortal filled the indifferent air. Not as a call to battle, but as a calm assurance came the feeling that India was one, Moslem, always had been, an assurance that lasted until they looked out of the door. Whatever Ghalib had felt, he had anyhow lived in India, and this consolidated it for them. He had gone with his own tulips and roses, but tulips and roses do not go. And the sister kingdoms of the north, Arabia, Persia, Fangana, Turkestan, stretched out their hands as he sang, sadly, because all beauty is sad, and greeted ridiculous Chandapur, where every street and house was divided against itself, and told her that she was a continent and a unity. Of the company, only Hamadullah had any comprehension of poetry. The minds of the others were inferior and rough. Yet they listened with pleasure, because literature had not been divorced from their civilization. The police inspector, for instance, did not feel that Aziz had degraded himself by reciting, nor break into the cheery guffaw with which an Englishman averts the infinity. He just sat, with his mind empty, and when his thoughts, which were mainly ignoble, flowed back into it, they had a pleasant freshness. The poem had done no good to anyone, but it was a passing reminder, a breath from the divine lips of beauty, a nightingale between two worlds of dust. Less explicit than the call to Krishna, it voiced our loneliness nevertheless, our isolation, our need for the friend who never comes, yet is not entirely disproved. Aziz it left thinking about women again, but in a different way. Less definite, more intense. Sometimes poetry had this effect on him. Sometimes it only increased his local desires, and he never knew beforehand which effect would ensue. He could discover no rule for this or for anything else in life. Hamadullah had called in on his way to a worrying committee of notables, nationalists in tendency, where Hindus, Moslems, 2 Sikhs, 2 Paris, a Jain, and a native Christian tried to like one another more than came natural to them. As long as someone abused the English, all went well, but nothing constructive had been achieved, and if the English were to leave India, the committee would vanish also. He was glad that Aziz, whom he loved, and whose family was connected with his own, took no interest in politics, which ruin the character and career, yet nothing can be achieved without them. He thought of Cambridge, sadly, as of another poem that had ended. How happy he had been there 20 years ago. Politics had not mattered in Mr. and Mrs. Bannister's rectory. There, games, work, and pleasant society had interwoven and appeared to be sufficient substructure for a national life. Here, all was wire-pulling and fear. Messrs. Saeed Mohammed and Haq, he couldn't even trust them, although they had come in his carriage, and the schoolboy was a scorpion. Bending down, he said, "Aziz, Aziz, my dear boy, we must be going. We are already late. Get well quickly, for I do not know what our little circle would do without you." "I shall not forget those affectionate words," replied Aziz. "Add mine to them," said the engineer. "Thank you, Mr. Saeed Mohammed, I will." "And mine, and sir, accept mine," cried the others, stirred each according to his capacity towards good will. And we'll pause here and we'll continue with this story in the next video. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Thanks so much for watching. I love you guys. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.